This video will be part 2 of my coverage of George Kelly and personal construct theory for PSY 230 personality theory. So we left off last time after I described the basic position and all of those lovely corollaries. Now we need to dig a little deeper into exactly what Kelly means by a personal construct. The way personal constructs are typically defined is the way I've been talking about them. It's the structure of the beliefs, attitudes, and values that we use to understand other people and to describe ourselves. So these are, basically Kelly is trying to encapsulate all of these various terms like attitudes, beliefs, and values under the heading of personal constructs. He argues that they come out of the way in which human beings have evolved the capacity to make meaning. So we see things that surround us, we experience them. Sometimes they're tangible objects, like I'm sitting at a desk and I have things on my face called glasses. Sometimes they're physical objects. Sometimes they are experiences that we've had. Sometimes they are abstract concepts, things like values. But we form what he referred to as private meanings, so that we can make sense of similar and dissimilar experiences, ideas, thoughts, beliefs, values, attitudes, and so on. Construing things means that we have this capacity to say to ourselves, this thing is similar to these other things, but it is dissimilar from these still more things. So we class together events that have similarities, and then we contrast those events or experiences with things that are seen as different. So again, there's this idea of constructs being made of dichotomies or binary elements. A new experience is either similar to or different from an existing construct that we use to make sense of the world. If a new experience is so unique and so unexpected that it doesn't fit within any of our current constructs, then a new construct has to be created. But most of the time, things that we experience day in and day out are things that can at least touch some aspect of an existing construct within our system of understanding. So basically what constructs do is they give us, a guidebook, a set of expectations that we can use to anticipate future events. And we use both experiences we've had with past similar events, but we also contrast it with dissimilar events so that we can make useful, practical guesses about what's going to occur in the world. What we find uncomfortable is when the world presents us with information that we simply cannot make sense of. I used the example in part 1 of the presentation of think about the people of Ukraine who, just a very short time ago were going about their business, and now their country is under attack by a foreign power. So, their worlds have literally been turned upside down, and they're scrambling for ways to contextualize their experience. So what do people do? They search their construct system to help them make sense. There are some things that are similar to things they know about, so knowledge structures that they already have. So they may tap into what happened in, say, Kosovo, what happened in Europe in World War II, what happened in other kinds of situations that they are familiar with, maybe not through their own personal experience, but through their study of history, or maybe their parents' experience, and so on. So they're going to tap into those knowledge sources to help them make predictions. But there are going to be some parts of what's happening to them right now that they have absolutely no context for. So those experiences are so disquieting because we don't have constructs to help us make them make sense for us. That's why they're so disturbing. So construct systems, because a construct in isolation isn't particularly useful. Constructs are useful because they're embedded in an organized system that helps us to make sense of lots and lots of different experiences. So basically, a construct system is good, qualitatively speaking, if it allows you to make sense of most of your experiences most of the time. A construct system is not so good when it fails to do those things. So what does a construct system do? First off, construct systems have to be useful in the future. A construct system that's only good for explaining the past isn't very useful to us from a functional standpoint. If your construct system is so outdated that it can't help you make sense of the world as it currently exists, I think this is one of the reasons in science fiction we're so fascinated with time travel, because if you get plunked out of your time and put in a new time, you don't have a construct system for making sense of that position that you're in. So the way construct systems work, according to Kelly, is that they're built out of enough information that they are helpful for planning. They're helpful for predicting what's going to happen next. So they're anticipatory. Basically, we use our construct system to anticipate the next thing that occurs. We tend to be the happiest when our anticipations are confirmed. I mentioned in part one that Kelly's model is sometimes referred to as a consistency model, primarily because we use our construct systems, our knowledge systems, to make guesses, anticipations. And when they're confirmed, we feel happy, content. When they're disconfirmed, we usually experience some kind of unpleasant emotion as a result. So when our anticipations are confirmed, it means that our construct system is useful for predicting the future. When our construct systems are disconfirmed, then it means that our belief systems have failed us. So what people attempt to do is they use past experiences to make their best guesses about future new events, and then they pay attention to any new information that happens during that event in order to tweak their construct system to help them to make the next prediction and the next prediction after that. So the process involves this, as your authors put it, forecasting. So you're basically saying, here's my construct system. Think about the last time you had a conversation with your friends about the whole COVID situation. Like, is it over? Is it not over? If we're going to go out to a restaurant, should we go out to a restaurant? If we go out, should we wear masks? Should we not wear masks? You're trying to make anticipations. You're trying to forecast what are other people doing, what are the norms going to be like when we go, and you're trying to make some predictions. What's difficult about situations like the one we're in right now is that our construct systems don't have enough information for us to feel confident in our forecasting. Now, if you take other sorts of situations, ones that you have a ton of experience with, you have a solid construct system that has lots of nuance and lots of building blocks, then we feel more confident in using that construct system to make anticipations, to make guesses, and we're usually confirmed. So we usually are able to interpret what we experience based on confirming information. When we're constantly being surprised, it makes us anxious. Sometimes it makes us angry and upset as a result. So this process, and Kelly was really fond of adding language to things that are actually pretty simple. But the process can be described as construing a replication. Basically, when you make a prediction about what you expect to have happen, you are in your mind replicating the event. So let's go back to my bad date example of when I was being set up on blind dates by friends. My expectation was that blind dates aren't bad, that they just don't go well. And basically, in my head, I'm creating a replication of what I expect to occur. And essentially, based on my construct, my construct system that represents the dating process, and blind dates are a subcategory thereof, I can construct a replication in my head, a likely scenario, a likely script of the event, and then when it actually happens, I'm in this evaluation space of saying, does it fit? Does it not fit? Does it confirm? Does it disconfirm? And so on and so on. Now, in actual practice, how does this mapping of a construct system work? And this is where we get into how you apply Kelly's theory to what you're actually doing when you talk to a client. So, remind yourself that Kelly was really looking at, for clinical work, how do you really get to know with depth your client's understanding of the world? And what he recommended was that you map it. You have to map out this person's sort of relational construct system. So this graphic is one that I found on Google Images, where what you see on the map here is every line represents a two-ended dichotomous construct. So basically, fun-loving, and you can't see the end of the line. The other end of the line on this image is conservative. You could go over here to rejecting, respecting, overwhelmed, to calm, and so on. So you have these dichotomies. You have, and then you have sort of relational elements. So this is a construct system reflecting a person named Gabriel. And you have some things that are kind of, out there on their own, but other things that are part of dichotomous structures. So, suffering to overcoming obstacles, and so on, nervous versus calm. And then you have some other relational things, like authority and father are hanging out over here versus friend and mother, and so on. So the way you map it out, and this is a process that would be engaged in between the therapist and the client, so that you have a visual representation of your internal construct system. And what the goal is for the person to be able to see these dichotomies, and the way in which they are influencing their approach to new situations, how they're shaping, say, Gabriel's interactions with his authority figure father, who is seen as straight-laced. He's also seen as literally in a sexual orientation sense as a straight person who's very conservative and fairly rigid, versus friends and lovers, and over here is the gay and the fun-loving, and so on. And then, this is all, maybe this is characteristic of all this conflict he perceives with his father, but not with his friends and his mother and his lover and even his ex-lover, which all kind of fit in this whole situation of people who know him, who are fun-loving, who are, accepting of his sexual orientation. Then you have this whole structure here of seeing himself as weak, as nervous, as having secrets, being overwhelmed, being suffering, feeling rejected. But what's the alternative? He wants these other things of enjoying things, being respected, being calm, being strong, open, and successful. But, as a student, not so much. Even after graduation, not so much. So what the whole process here of construct systems is kind of laying bare this underlying cognitive system for self-understanding And Kelly really thought this was a way that you could help people to explore how their belief system is built and then reconstruct it, change their approach to how they're relating to the world. So construct systems, and here we're going back into the mathy language, that I wish it would just be stated a little more simply, because it's really not that complicated a theory when you dig down under the surface. So the way construct systems are structured, there's order. So the principle of ordination says that there is a hierarchical structure to construct systems. And by that hierarchical structure, remember how I said you have social relationships at maybe the broadest level of the hierarchy. Then under that you have, say, work friends, casual acquaintances, close friends, best friends, intimate relationships, dating relationships. There are hundreds of different things under that broad heading of social relationships. So there's a hierarchical organization to constructs. The second is this idea of fragmentation. So you can have a whole construct system, a big broad construct system. It's entirely possible that there are contradictions built in to your construct system. So for example, you may have constructs for yourself about your social relationships that are built on a lot of perceptions about similarities. Wanting to have friendships with people that have the same beliefs as you, the same values as you. Well, how do you factor in, the fact that you might have some really good relationships with people who have very different beliefs from you? So there may be fragmentations, areas of inconsistency. Now, sometimes those can be overwhelming, and the result is that you have to change your construct system. But most of the time, fragmentations are minor, and they require relatively little introspection. Third, you have to take into consideration range, and this was a concept that was mentioned also in the corollaries. Constructs they have a specified range. They only cover certain kinds of material. So for example, first dates are a construct, and they only cover that range. It's not for second dates, it's only for first dates. Or blind dates. They're only for that kind where you really don't know the person and you've been set up by other people. There's a range there. Some constructs have a very broad range. Some have a very narrow range. But regardless, there is a kind of way of delineating what that range is. And then finally, there's an expectation of modulation. And again, this was in the corollaries, so some of this is review. Modulation refers to, how modifiable, basically, is your construct. Is a construct really connected to deep structured, long-held beliefs and values? Or is it, fairly on the fly? Maybe it's a new set of constructs, or maybe it's a temporary set of constructs that you're going to use for now, and then you're going to dismiss. So constructs vary in terms of the degree to which they can be modified on the fly. And some individuals have entire construct systems that are more permeable than other people. So for some people, their construct systems are very rigid and don't have a lot of modulation. Whereas other people, their entire construct system may be characterized by a high degree of modulation, where they feel very comfortable shaking things up and having a fluid, flexible construct system, whereas some other people are simply just characteristically uncomfortable with that. They like to know exactly how things are constructed, and they want to use only the constructs that they are familiar with to make sense of their world. Now, in Kelly's model, there's this idea of choice, and a related concept of experience. For Kelly, we always have the capacity to choose how to view the world. So essentially, using the tool that is your construct system, you can select alternatives that help you to make sense of what's going on around you. So your construct system is going to help you to make sense of, or to think about the experiences that are in front of you. And essentially, he argues that you have the capacity, because, we're big brain creatures, we have a rich cognitive life, and we have evolved in such a way that we organize our world into these constructs. That, we have to make choices about how we're going to perceive things, and how we're going to decode them. By making those choices of how we're going to interpret what's going on around us, that dictates how we behave. So for example, if I'm out in the world and I start to perceive that someone who is around me is behaving in a threatening manner, I've made a choice. So I have a construct system that helps me to determine whether another human being in my environment is a threat to me. I have to make a choice. Am I actually perceiving that this person is a threat or not? So again, there's that dichotomous thing. So I make a choice. Yes, they are a threat. That helps me to anticipate what that person's going to do, and it also dictates what my next move is going to be. Am I going to run? Am I going to hide? Am I going to call 911? Or am I going to turn around and have a fight with this person? So choice refers to that. You're going to explore your construct system, make an interpretation, make an attribution, and then decide what to do. Now, experience refers to your ability to, on the fly, re-explore what you're experiencing and then make new decisions. So for example, if back out in that world, I experienced someone, and at one moment I experienced them as behaving in a way that might be a threat to me. But then as I continue to observe, I realize that their behavior is in fact not threatening, but instead they are simply in a great deal of a hurry. They appear to be talking through their earbuds in a conversation in a very animated way, and they appear to be angry with someone, but not with me. So then I reconstrue. No, they're not a threat to me. They're actually having an animated conversation with someone else, and they're not a threat to me at all. So I can then use my experience to reinterpret the event, to reconstrue them, and that shifts my worldview in that moment so that I change my behaviors in response. So essentially, there's this concept of cycles of experience. Based on what I just said about choice and experience, the way we live in the world is through what Kelly called cycles of experience. So what are these made of? Well, first, they're made of our anticipations. What do you think is going to happen? Like, yesterday I had this online meeting. Some of the people in the meeting were in person. I had to be online because of scheduling issues. I sit down, I open the agenda, I start thinking about what's going to happen in this meeting. And my expectations, my anticipation is based on a lifetime of professional experiences in meetings with faculty. So my anticipation is based on those events from the past and my constructs for the current climate of how meetings are going to take place. Part of my anticipation also involves the degree to which I'm invested in my current constructs related to those kinds of events. So go back to the meeting idea. I have some anticipations about the meeting. Now, if I have a great deal of emotional investment in the construct system that I'm currently using, I may be more engaged in constantly evaluating and reevaluating my anticipations. If I'm less engaged, if I'm less invested, maybe I'm new to these kinds of meetings. For me, in my situation with the meeting I had yesterday, I'm highly invested, so I'm going to use my construct system differently in the cycle of this particular experience. I have more repetitions through this particular cycle of experience, therefore my anticipations are likely to be different in quality than someone who's less invested. Kelly used the word encountering to refer to the idea that you come into events with a certain level of commitment to what the outcome is that you anticipate. For some of us, if our anticipations have a great deal of emotional valence, like we really want something to happen or we really don't want something to happen, and we're highly invested in the construct system that we're using to make predictions, the encounter with that event is going to be shaped very differently based on the level of investment and the type of anticipation that we're making. So if you have a person who is high investment, they have a real clear goal for what they anticipate. Their experience of encountering that event is going to be colored by that. If a person is less invested, they are making a guess about what occurs, but they're not really all that wrapped up in it, then their encounter with the event is going to feel different to them. Kelly used the dichotomy of confirmation, disconfirmation to refer to, what is the outcome? You're in this experience, you're in the encounter, if you will. Either your anticipation is confirmed or it is disconfirmed. Now, sometimes when our anticipation of the event, we really are committed, we're invested in a particular outcome that confirms our expectations. If it ends up that it's disconfirmed, and I'm open to that may be an interesting surprise. If I'm not open to that disconfirmation, that's going to make me unsettled, angry, fearful, whatever. So think about election results. Let's say your anticipation based on your construct system is that a certain candidate is going to be elected, and your construct system about the way the world works or the way the world should work really has you highly invested. And then you're watching the election outcomes. That's the encountering part of it. Your high level of investment, you're not open to losing. You have an expectation your candidate's going to win. You are not open to disconfirmation. That's going to lead to, you're disconfirmed, like your candidate loses. That disconfirmation is going to, in your situation, is going to make you really, really angry and make you call into question the validity of what you're being told. Now, let's say that, in your anticipation of the event, the election, you're not all that invested. You're predicting who might win, but you don't really care who wins. While you're watching the election outcomes, that's the encounter part, your anticipation could either be confirmed or disconfirmed, and it doesn't really matter because you're really open to either being validated or invalidated in terms of your expectation. The next step then is constructive revision. So based on the encounter, if you're open to either the experience of confirmation or disconfirmation, then you update your construct system. If you're resistant to disconfirmation in particular, then you're not going to change your construct system, and in fact you're going to double down and strengthen your construct system, such that it continues to validate the structure of that system in the first place. So what you're kind of getting a hint at here is how do people who view the world very differently differ in the way that they use their construct system. And that concludes part 2 of my coverage of George Kelly's personal construct theory.